I've been working with the topic of disinformation and open source intelligence for over 6-7 years now. And I think there hasn't been a time in my professional career that open source was more crucial than during the war in Ukraine.
OSINT community continuously working on revealing and documenting Russian crimes, identifying losses of machinery and equipment on Russians, and also help to debunk Russian lies so that their disinformation are false flags.
The Kremlin-owned and pro-Kremlin online outlets increasingly reported over the 4 months leading up to Russia's reinvasion that Ukraine is preparing to attack the Donbas region or Russia.
However, it is important to remember that OSINT has two sides of a coin, and it can be used also by Russian community.
Hello and welcome to Ukrainian Flames, a special project by UkraineNews and Euroatlantic Course. My name is Victoria Zabiyan, I'm head of the UCMC Press Center. Please like, share this video and subscribe our channel to stay tuned. Since the first day of Russia's full-scale invasion, there has been widespread evidence around the world that this aggression is brutal, unjustified, and aimed to destroy the Ukrainian people. Apparently, if it had happened 20 or 30 years ago, it would not have been so easy to prove the actions of Russian war criminals, because then we did not have so much open data, access to satellite images, social networks of the occupiers, and so on. And today we will talk about how the collection and analysis of data gathered from open sources helps to make Russia accountable for war crimes in Ukraine. We gathered specialists on the topic and ready to share their points with you. And we start with Lukas Andriukaitis, Associate Director at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. Let's take a look.
Hello, my name is Lukas Andriukaitis. I'm an Associate Director with the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. And I've been working with the topic of disinformation and open source intelligence for over 6-7 years now. And I think there hasn't been a time in my professional career that open source was more crucial than during the war in Ukraine. The thing that this war is different from others that I have experienced in my professional career is that the belligerent side is completely living in the world of lies and has overstepped the boundaries of and is far off from just spreading disinformation. It is just constructing the whole narrative about the war, including war crimes, including the atrocities they have caused on every single level within the country. So we are dealing with a country that is not only lying in their media outlets, a country that is lying on the top levels of the government as well. For example, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Defense and the President's office. The whole country is living in a world of lies. And I think open source intelligence, in this case, it allows us to provide that lifeline that helps people to understand what is actually happening, to divert the state-run propaganda machine from those lies. And throughout the war, there has been a number of different examples where this has been very crucial. Since the war started, the DFRLab has focused most of its attention towards documenting war crimes, documenting what is happening on the ground, trying to save as many open source evidence as possible, and keep it until Russia loses the war, and that open source evidence can be used to actually can be brought to court and brought to justice as well. So some of the best examples of open source intelligence during the war that not only shows how open source works, but of course shows the importance of why is this so crucial, where the scenes of the most horrific war crimes, such as Bucha or the shelling of Kharkiv. Bucha, I guess, is the most well-known example where a lot of open source researchers and other organizations have been trying to document what is happening on the ground, showing how Russian state media and the Russian government and their officials have been lying about committing war crimes, and how basically I think this is a textbook example how open source intelligence with satellite imagery has proved that the atrocities were done by the Russian military. Very similar example has been the shelling of Kharkiv in the early days of war, where a Russian rocket launchers and artillery systems have been shelling the city from the Russian territory, denying that it's happening on the ground. And we have been able to find evidence using satellite images, finding the remains of those rockets used, of artillery shells, of victims that have been killed during those attacks, and backtrace to the exact locations of where those rockets have been launched, and it has been done from the Russian territory itself. So to put it briefly, I think open source intelligence allows us to document, allows us to find evidence, and allows us to keep an archive for future reference. These crimes that are being committed on mass scale, and in a war that has, I think, stands out from others, that is so well documented by civilians and by people on the ground, and also by satellite images or from space. I think this just shows not only the grim presence and the grim nature of the Russian Federation that it is today, but also that shows the how wars will be most likely fought in the future, and we're learning a lot of lessons how to best document it, how to best analyze it, and how to keep it until the day when belligerents will lose the war and will have to answer for their crimes.
Our next speaker is Roman Osadchuk, gives more cases in successful OSINT investigations during the Russian-Ukrainian war. Let's listen to his points.
OSINT played a great role in revealing what Russian troops done near the Ukrainian border, and helped identifying types of troops and vehicles even before the escalation during the build-up. But after the large-scale invasion on February 24 started, OSINT community continuously working on revealing and documenting Russian crimes, identifying losses of machinery and equipment among Russians, and also helped to debunk the Russian lies so that their disinformation falls flat. Community stores and archives evidence of Russia's crimes so that it could be used by courts that would be reviewing those cases later. So any action is actually leaving some trails online, and OSINT community is actually looking to find them and store them so that they could be used in the future. One of the most important things that I worked with since the invasion is the case when there was a disinformation campaign trying to portray Ukrainian military selling weapons that they receive as an aid from allies from the West. So it involved a fabricated letter, presumably from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, that claimed that some stockpiles of weaponry and ammunition would be sold to the third countries. But actually, because there are some OSINT tools and also cross-checks allowed to see that this letter was absolutely false and there is no ground behind it, but still a lot of pro-Russian sources and Telegram channels heavily amplified this information. But even now, like this case was, as of now, like 2 months old, even now, these messages continued and disinformation continued to popping up, breaking even new kind of false evidence to contribute to this disinformation narrative. But still, it could be easily debunked via some cross-checks and basic fact-checking. Another really important case that they worked with is it was actually immediately after the shelling of the Kramatorsk railway station on April 8th. The missile with the inscription for the children hit the railway station, killing a few dozens and injuring more than 100 people. Russians tried to put the blame on Ukraine for shelling its citizens. However, one Russian pro-war and pro-Kremlin Telegram channel prematurely boasted that they had Ukrainian armed forces on this same railway station minutes after the shelling actually happened, and celebrated those casualties among Ukrainian armed forces. But after they realized that the missile actually hit civilians, they first edited and then deleted their publication to cover footprints of Russian involvement into this horrible situation. Finally, multiple sources started claiming that Russia do not use this type of munition whatsoever, so definitely not the Russians. Still, because of the OSINT tools, we were able to find that those publications celebrating presumably casualties among Ukrainian armed forces were actually written. So we found them and could actually prove that it was the missile launched presumably by Russians. And also other researchers found out the footage of the missile systems of this type in question being transported on Belarus territory and Russian territory with letters Z and V inscribed on them, proving that Russians' claims that they are not using them false.
Buziashvili, a research assistant for the Caucasus at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, explains that OSINT researchers can not only reveal actions of Russia as aggressor, but predict a lot. She shared with us the details of the research made on the eve of Russian invasion, when her team and she were trying to understand whether Russian invasion can really happen.
On November 1, 2021, Politico published satellite images by Maxar Technologies showing new Russian military buildup near Ukraine. The images were confirming that time report that Russia was once again massing troops and military equipments on the border with Ukraine after a major buildup in spring 2021. Following the reports, the major question discussed everywhere was, will Russia reinvade Ukraine? My colleague Esteban and I decided to study the disinformation and false flag narratives around Ukraine that were published by the Kremlin outlets in that period. Our research covered how the Russian online outlets were preparing ground for and predicting Russia's next moves, and how the escalation of narratives was in line with the Kremlin's next steps to further invade Ukraine. These narratives were used by the Kremlin to justify Russia's war and war crimes in Ukraine later during the war. The Kremlin-owned and pro-Kremlin online outlets increasingly reported over the 4 months leading up to Russia's reinvasion that Ukraine is preparing to attack the Donbas region or Russia. Between November 2021 to January 2022, the coverage in Russian media of the Ukrainian attack preparation narrative rose dramatically, with a nearly 50% increase in January. So how we came up with the research idea? While monitoring the Russian information space in late 2021, we observed an increase in the narrative that Ukraine plans to attack. And to measure how the narrative proliferated on Russian media, we selected 10 Kremlin-owned and pro-Kremlin online outlets with a history of spreading Kremlin narratives. We then selected 6 Russian keywords to track the coverage of the narrative. The keywords were Ukraine, abbreviation for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, provocation, attack, assault, and offense. And we applied a combination of these words to identify articles pushing for the disinformation narrative. And in total, we utilized 8 combinations consisting of 6 keywords. And the time period of the queries ran from beginning of November 2021 through the end of January 2022. So we conducted this research in the end of January. To collect the data, we used the SERP API, a real-time API, which is application programming interference with access to Google's search engine results page. And the query gave us 2,888 articles containing these keyword combinations that were published between the analyzed time period. And to exclude the false positives, like the articles which used the keywords but didn't really spread the narrative, we manually reviewed the content of all the articles collected to identify those spreading the narrative and to exclude the others. And basically, we skimmed through some tens of articles. And after filtering the false positive, we identified 317 articles spreading the narrative that Ukraine was planning to attack. And out of these 317 articles, 151 were published in January 2022. It means that there was a nearly 50% increase in spread of the Ukraine plans attack narrative. And in this 3 months period, interestingly, the narrative also became increasingly hostile. For example, in November 2021, the articles claimed that Kiev was violating the ceasefire agreement, and that there was a possibility Ukraine could attack the Donbas region. In December 2021, the outlets blamed the United States for training extremists for the purpose of attacking the Donbas region. In January 2022, the outlets claimed that Ukraine might stage a chemical attack in Donbas and blame it on the Russia-backed separatist authorities. And of course, the scale of this online operation to prepare ground for justifying Russia's war and war crimes in Ukraine was larger. Because our research had some limitations, like we only studied 10 online outlets in only 3 months period, and also some synonyms for the Russian words for attack or escalation might have been used by those outlets to spread the narrative, right? But basically, the tactics of Russian online outlets was in line with the steps planned and later implemented by the Kremlin. And the dramatic increase in number and the narrative becoming more hostile led to Russia's reinvasion of Ukraine on 24th of February.
Jakub Kubs, analyst at DebunkEU, underlines that it is necessary to remember that Russia also has its own OSINT community, and they use the same instrument in order to find the necessary information.
My name is Jakub Kubs, and I cooperate with DebunkEU, this Lithuanian think tank that analyzes disinformation and pro-Kremlin propaganda. So I would like to talk briefly about the technique known as open source intelligence, which we use, among other things. Open source intelligence, or for short OSINT, is a very important tool for information verification and exploration. As the name implies, it is based on publicly available information, and this distinguishes it from stealing information like hacking. So, although OSINT analysts use many special computer programs, their main tools include very common applications like Google Maps. So in this context, it can be said that OSINT analysts can identify places by using such features as landscape, characteristic buildings, car license plates, and so on. So since February 2022, when Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, the OSINT community from Western countries has been involved in helping to identify Russian weaponry, troop movements and verifying photos and videos, which were left by soldiers on social media. However, it is important to remember that OSINT has two sides of a coin, and it can be used also by a Russian community. So there was a case recently that on Russian Telegram was published the exact coordinate of a Ukrainian military facility. And it was the Russian OSINT community was able to determine it using material broadcasted by a Ukrainian television. Journalists showed only the inside of the facility, but nevertheless, using open source content and information, Russian community was able to find the exact location, and it resulted in a coordinated missile strike, which resulted in destroying the facility and killing several civilians. So it is important to stress how crucial it is to monitor and control the information which goes mainstream during the wartime, because it can be used by the enemy. So, as already mentioned, as part of its activities, DebunkEU analysts monitor Russian propaganda on social media. In our recent report, we paid a special attention to the Lithuanian disinformation page called Minfo. So in April, the page featured a Russian mindfulness teacher stating that the war in Ukraine is actually a part of the West's struggle with Russia, and that both sides are to be condemned because their main interests are money. So the video skyrocketed the reactions by Facebook users, which was rather suspicious, as normally Minfo does not generate so much reactions. And using tools provided by Facebook and other more deepened ways of using search engines, we were able to trace how the video ended up on the Lithuanian Facebook page. So a few days before it was published there, it was shared on a TikTok profile, which spread Russian propaganda, and also on the Facebook page of a shady Ukrainian housing agency. And our analysis showed that the manager of the Ukrainian agency account is probably fake, and that people who manage this account are probably connected to Russia. So then we analyzed the tens of thousands of profiles which interacted with this problematic video. And it turned out that most of them were users allegedly from Ukraine, Moldova, Kazakhstan, Romania, and which was also suspicious because in general Minfo page is dedicated to Lithuanians and very rarely post anything in which is not in Lithuanian language. So that is why the unprecedented number of reactions from other countries was suspicious. And although in many cases the profiles looked like real people, when we did deepened analysis, we could determine that most of the profiles are fake. And sometimes it could be determined by using the same slogan by accounts which are unconnected to each other, or their hyperactivity. They were posting several propaganda content pieces in the same time, like in few seconds, and sometimes even at night or during all night. So we could determine that the video shared by Minfo page was part of the propaganda information operation, in which the network of bots was used to make the material go viral and reach real people and weaken their morale. So we conduct more analysis on social media, and the recent discovery is the identification of a network of Facebook pages which are impersonating Ukrainian women. And interestingly, all pages were set up in the similar period, just before or just after the Russian invasion of Ukraine began. And also the pages are located in the same place, in 2 districts of Kyiv. And because we can say that the accounts were created using SIM cards, not email addresses, in all likelihood they can be a part of a pro-Russian bot farm. And it is very important to mention that in early February 2022, the Ukrainian Security Service neutralized 2 pro-Russian bot farms in Lviv. and the organizers, using several thousand SIM cards, were able to generate up to 18,000 fake accounts, which in social media is a significant number that can shift the attention of real users to propaganda. And so we hope that our analysis will contribute to combating the harmful activities of pro-Kremlin agents on the internet and in social media. And we are still standing for the good side. So thank you for the attention, and Slava Ukraini.
You've been watching Ukrainian Flames, a special project by Ukraine Crisis Media Center and NGO Euroatlantic Course. In the description to this video you can find the information about how personally you can help Ukraine against Russian aggression. Everything is gonna be Ukraine.